Hiya, Martin here. Thank you for joining me once again. Apologies for not posting a video for the past couple of weeks. I had planned on a big special turning for my first anniversary of wood turning, but due to me cocking it up, I will have to put that off for another day. So yeah, today I'm going to turn a gunmetal Amiga fountain pen from Taylor's Murfield here in the UK. Beautiful pens, lovely lines on the nibs of the pen, beautifully manufactured as well, I have to say, really, really special. And this one is turned from cedar of Lebanon. It's got a satin finish to it, which is a variation on a CA glue finish. There is CA glue on it and in it, but it's my own variation of a usual normal CA glue finish. Now I don't know if this particular type of finish is unique to me. I've watched hundreds of pen turning videos on YouTube, and I haven't seen anybody that finishes a pen like this. So without wanting to say it's my finish, it is a variation of a CA glue finish that may or may not be used particularly frequently, but I love the finish because it gives a satin sheen to the pen without a really, really high gloss, which I personally am not too fond of. It is just a personal thing, so there is nothing wrong at all with a normal big deep gloss CA glue finish on pens. It's just that I prefer to turn mine with a satin finish like this. So if there are any pen turners out there wanting a satin finish, then give this one a go. It's not difficult, and the result is a slightly understated pen. So let's see how I turn a Taylor Murfield gunmetal Amiga fountain. Enjoy the video. Bye for now. The first order of the day is to choose the blank that I want to turn the pen out of. And here's my blank tray. I keep it in a drawer under here. What have I got? I've got some, that's blue cedar, I've got some spalted beech, what's that? Oh, that's Indian bean. Yeah, that turns interestingly. There's some Burr Wych Elm. I'm not sure what this is. I can't remember. It might be walnut, but there's cherry, maple, holly, sycamore, more beech, apple, walnut, all sorts of things. And over here, I've got some blanks and stuff that I'd prepared last Christmas for turning Christmas decorations out of. But they will happily make some nice pens. And also, what I've done here is, I don't know how well you can see that, but I've got here some colour, some of the coloured stains that I use, the chestnut stains, which I normally only put on spalted beech and sycamore, and that gives me just a decent idea on how the final colour will look when I colour the pen. Now, to choose the blank that I want to use, I take the nib of the pen, and today it's going to be the gunmetal Amiga fountain pen from Taylor's Murfield, and I just kind of move the nib over the blanks to find which one I think would look best. And I'm going to choose cedar of Lebanon. So we're going to use cedar of Lebanon. So I'm going to put the nib away and then get it over to the table saw to cut it to size. When choosing wood blanks and buying them in, I normally try and buy them a bit longer than normal and a bit chunkier than normal as well. And I buy them a little bit longer because if there's any figure in the wood, I can move the pen up or down the blank as I need to incorporate the figure in the wood. Now there's a really nice piece of figuring here on this piece of cedar, so I want to have the main part, the body of the pen here, and the cap on this side. So using a pencil I can just mark off pretty roughly where I want the bits to go. Remembering to mark across the centre like so, so when I get them onto the mandrel I can line the grain up. Right. Next up on my crosscut sledge, I've got a stop block which I can move left and right depending upon the length of the tube that I want. So what I start off with is I'm going to mark the length of the cap, just lining it up, so I've got about a millimetre or so just to the right of the cut there. Push the clamp down like so, and then when I push the block up I know that that cut is going to be the right length for the tube. So I've lined the mark up to the left of the cut line and just in line with the teeth of the blade. Face shield down. Right, and then with that cut done I can move it over for the cap part of the pen. There's the cap, and then find the longer tube for the body of the pen, move the stop block over, and make the cut. And there we have the two parts of the pen. Now I need to drill the hole for the tube, and the body of the tube takes I think it's a 25/64, and then I put it in the chuck jaws on the big lathe, because I'm the proud owner of the world's worst drill press that doesn't have a particularly good travel, and I know it won't get to the bottom of this piece, so I use the main lathe. And then just in a Jacob's chuck I put the drill bit, and I always try and put the drill bits in as far as they'll go just to give them a bit of support. And I haven't got the lathe going particularly quickly, so I just line the bit up. And it's really important as well that your piece, when it's in the chuck, is as 90 degrees to the chuck as possible, otherwise it goes all skewy and horrible. And just like when drilling on a drill press, it's important that you put the drill in and then bring it back out to clear the swarf, because when you get to the bottom of the pen, if you've got a load of swarf blocking it up, then it just pushes out and you get tear out at the bottom of the cut. One last pass and that will be done. There we go. That's the tube done for the body of the pen, and then I'll do exactly the same thing for the cap. Okay, got the two halves, or the two parts of the blank and the two tubes. And the next thing I need to do is glue the tubes into the blanks. And now when the tubes come, they're quite shiny, like so, which doesn't make for a particularly good adhesive surface for the epoxy. So just taking some sandpaper, I use a fairly coarse grit. This is 80. I just score the outside of the tube just to rough it up a bit. I don't know if you can see that particularly well. Just rough it up just a little bit so the glue has got something to adhere to. And then you can use CA glue if you want to. CA glue does a pretty good job, especially if you're in a rush, and I find the Zappa Gap CA glue works an absolute treat for that. But most of the time I use a two-part epoxy, and this is the Zap Z Epoxy 5-minute formula. I don't find that it goes off in 5 minutes, but it does at least go off in a reasonable time. So squeeze equal amounts of the epoxy onto a scrap board, enough to cover both of the tubes. So that was the, which one's that? That's the resin, and then you need the hardener. Equal amounts, and I pour one part of the epoxy on one side and the other part on the other side, just so I can make sure there's enough. And then with a mixing stick or the end of a paintbrush, like I use, give it a good mix. And wear gloves as well, because it's horribly sticky stuff. Grab your blank, and then grab your tube, and then just run the glue around the tube like so. You don't have to cover the whole tube, I find, because it will squeeze out the end of the blank. Right, now another thing I do is to make sure that the grain is as closely matched as possible. I start at the back of the blank, so opposite the other end to where I left the grain mark. Push the tube in about half, 3/4 of the way, give it a twist to get some glue there. See some glue in there. And then push the tube in from the other end. And then I just use the edge of my gluing block just to push it so it's not quite flush, it's just inside the blank of wood there. And then I'll scrape off the other end like so, and there is one of the blanks glued up. And then you do exactly the same thing with the other one. Now, abrasive wise, you can get sort of pen turners packs of abrasives, which are about half, 3/4 of an inch wide and on a big long reel, and they're about £9.99, about £10, something like that, which will be about $13 odd, but they're about $9.99 here in the UK. But I find I get better value for money by buying the full-size sheets of abrasive and then cutting them down into strips like so, which I'll show you how to do now. And I use 150, 240, 320, 400 and 600, and I'm running out of 400, so I've got my 400 grit paper. And I normally do 2 sheets at a time, and I find I can get a good, possibly 30 odd pens out of 2 sheets of paper. So I've got the paper, and then I just fold it in half, like so, get a ruler, and then with a sharp blade on a craft knife, oops, cut it in half, like so, and then put your 4 halves on top of each other, and then just cut along to make your strips. And you'll find that you can get, depending upon the wood you're using, you might be able to get 2 pens out. You might be able to sand 2 pens with one sheet of that. So I've got to do the 400 and then the 150, but I won't bore you with that because the process is really simple. See you in a minute. The next thing I need to do is sand back the blank to square off the wood with the ends of the tube, like so. Now you can do this on a drill press with a gizmo I can't remember the name of, but I don't think you can get the shoulders to fit the tubes for this particular pen. So I use the sanding wheel I made on the lathe, which is clamped down the bottom, and then I've made sure that the bed of the sanding disc is 90 degrees to the disc itself, and also just here I've made some marks at 90 degrees so I can just push the blank into the disc to sand it down, and it should, in theory, be square at the ends. Haha, let's see. I don't have it going too quickly because there's no need to. So line the blank up along my 90 degree mark. And then when I'm done sanding, or rather as I'm sanding, I take it down just until it starts to burnish the end of the tube there. You can just see the tube glistening in the light. And then I take a bushing, push one of the bushings in for the pen kit that I'm using, and just make sure that it sits nice and flush all the way round the end of the blank. Now, with the ends of the blank squared off and my grain marked across the centre, as we did at the beginning of the process, I can now get the pen onto the lathe, which doesn't matter which way round you put the pen, but it's funny, with pens with caps like this, I normally put the cap on the left, or my left, of the lathe. So you need the 2 fatter bits, slide them onto the pen mandrel, like so. The only spacers I use with this mandrel are the end ones, the little curvy ones. I don't bother with the others. And then the next one is the other fat one, and then the end one sits in like so. Slide that on, end spacer, bring up the tailstock. Now This is a compression mandrel, so there isn't a screwy bit on the end that puts pressure down through the mandrel to keep the blanks still. This one has a hollow centre which you just slide over the end. I normally slide it on with about 5mm to spare. Tighten it up. Yeah. And then just advance the quill and give it a bit of a squeeze and then lock it down like so, making sure again that your grain line is marked across the centre. Right, I'm going to put the camera looking down and we can get turning. Now I only use two tools when, or two chisels when turning pens. One of them is a roughing gouge, this one, and the other tool I use is just a normal spindle gouge like this one. Well, this one. Again with a fingernail grind. It's quite severe. It's nice and flat. Some guys use skew chisels for their pens, but I'm not scared of the skew chisel, but I actually prefer not to use it and do a nice finish with abrasives. Now, the purists out there might criticise me for it, which is absolutely fine, but there is no right or wrong way to turn a pen, or the right or the wrong tools to use. So let's get going with this. Turn on the extractor. Get turning. So I'm just going to turn it round first of all. Okay, now I've turned it round and I've got it into a very, very vague shape, and then I'm just going to take the spindle gouge just to finish off the shape. I don't normally go with funny angles or jaggedy stuff. I prefer a smoother, more classic line to my pens, and especially these fountain pens. So I'll fire it up again, and I'll just turn the shape down to how I want it. I need to bring the tool rest up a touch. Now I hope you can see here, but with these pens where you've got the fat bushing in the middle for the nib and the cap or the tip, the end of the pen, the top of the pen, I like to have a little bulb, as it were, that comes out a little bit from the main bushing, and then it'll fade off into the tip of the pen, so it comes out a bit and then fades in, which is what I'm going to do now. And there we go. That's the pen shaped, and now I need to sand it down. So as you can see here, I've got a little bulb that comes out and then it tapers off nicely towards the end of the pen, and then the cap of the pen rises slightly from the bushing at both ends, and then is pretty much square all the way down the length of the cap. Lose the tool rest and then bring up a light sanding with 150 grit paper. Turn the fan on. The 150 grit just loses most of the tool marks and just helps to refine the shape a little bit. Make sure you get the ends of the wood nicely done as well. You don't need an awful lot of pressure when sanding a pen, and I always keep the paper moving as well. Just make sure that you're nice and flush with the bushings everywhere. Now another thing I do is, after I've done the sanding with each of the papers, I give it a little rub in the opposite direction, so with the grain, that just helps to lose the marks going around, just a light rubbing, and then move on to the next one, which is 240. And I fold the paper in half, and I do one end of the pen with half of it, and then the other end of the pen with the other half. There, right, that's the 240 done. Now what I do before I add any oil is I clean the wood with some methylated spirits, just to lift as much of the dust and the crap out of the grain as possible. You can see, look, it's coming off. So when I add the oil, the wood is as clean as it possibly can be, and also for when the CA glue is applied to it as well. And now Danish oil. I always use Danish oil. Give that a good rub. Good rubbing. This is a beautiful pen. Hopefully, anyway. It's a beautiful piece of wood. And then spin it. And then I get some heat into the wood to dry the oil off. Now this lathe only turns at a maximum of, I think it's 1400 RPM, so I haven't actually slowed the lathe down from when I was cutting the wood to sanding. Just get some heat into the wood and that will dry the oil, ready for the CA. Now, this is where my method of CA finishing is different to most others, because I'm not keen on the high gloss finishes, and I prefer a more satin sheen to my pens. And also I find with this finish you can feel more of the texture of the wood in the finish, rather than a very smooth glossy finish that a normal CA glue finish produces. Right, so I've got some medium CA glue on a piece of kitchen towel, and then I rub it in. I rub it into the wood over the top of the oil, and I keep rubbing and keep rubbing and keep rubbing until it starts to go off. I should be wearing gloves really. So I just keep rubbing, and then it goes really, really sticky, and then I wipe it back. I'm not worried if I get any crap on there, like so. Where's my accelerator? There it is. Give it a spin. A little bit of accelerator just to set it off. Rub the accelerator off. There we go. So that's sanded to 240 with the CA glue over the top of that. And now I go to the next paper that I want, which is 320. And then take off the CA glue. Take off the CA glue until you're just beginning to turn wood again. There. So we've sanded that back now, so we're just back on the wood. Now what I think, now I'm not a scientist, but what I think happens with this variation of a CA finish is when you rub the glue into the grain, the glue sinks into the grain and binds the fibres together like so, and then obviously leaves a coating on top. But when you sand that coating away, it leaves the top of the grain or the top of the wood visible, but the actual fibres of the grain are glued together, and I find that I get a beautiful finish on there. I mean, that's so smooth at 320. It's really, really lovely. So that's the theory behind this slight variation on a CA finish. So then as you take off a little bit more of the wood with the 320, the 400 and the 600, the fibres of the wood are still bound together, so you get a nice solid finish, but without the high gloss. So I'll do this side, and then I'll come back when I'm just finishing 600. Oh yeah, what I forgot to mention was, because you rub the glue across, there is a very high chance that the blank is going to stick to the bushings. So open up your mandrel and just break the ends. Break the ends so you can get the blank off the pen, and make sure that you can turn them, and then wind the quill back in and keep going. Now here we are, that's down to 400 grit, and then the last step I do is 600 grit with a touch of oil. And that helps lubricate the final cut. And also pushes some more oil into the wood, into the fibre rather than the grain, I think. give it a wipe down with, just take the remainder of the dust off with some blue towel, with some kitchen towel. And there we go. There's the, that's just finished down to 600 grit, and that is just smooth as smooth can be. It's really, really nice. Very happy with that. And then just to finish off, I'm going to use some Canuba wax, and then over the top of that some beeswax from a local beekeeper. Just need a quick run of the Canuba wax, and then with some towel get it nice and hot so it melts and forms a film. Like so. That looks super duper. Liking that a lot. And then for the beeswax, exactly the same. Just run it along. And yeah, that's lovely. It's a very nice satin finish. Yeah, very nice. Right, I'm going to let that cool down and then we'll put the pen together. Here's the pen off the mandrel, and this is the cap. So the cap will have those two bits in together, and then the handle of the pen, or the body of the pen, will be in like so. Now, the important thing with pens is you need to make sure that the grain matches up, and I always try and, with the cap for example, I don't want the clip running down, I want the clip running down where the grain curves. So I think I want the cap running down that bit, like so. So over on the actual press itself, over here, I have to say my pen lathe isn't particularly well thought out for making YouTube films. So you literally just press it together in the pen press. There's the cap of the pen. Now what I also do is with the body of the pen is I screw this bit, I screw the centre piece, the centre band, into the cap where it fits nice and tight, and then line the grain up, which is going to be something like that. So the grain is now lined up how I want it to be, and then I press these two bits together so I know that when the cap is screwed on, the grain is going to align how I want it to be. Very careful at this point not to put too much pressure on it, just get it in, and then I can take the cap off and then push it the remainder of the way in, and then the finial like so, and then press the ink reservoir onto the nib like so, and that will slide in there. So there's the pen, and then when I screw the cap on, the grain lines up nicely, like so. And here we go. Here is the finished pen. I have to say they are a dream to turn, these Amiga fountain pens from Taylor's Murfield. Lovely looking pen, with a satiny finish, and the grain lines up along the pen. Overall, I'm very, very happy with it. I hope you enjoyed today's pen project. If you did, or even if you didn't, please do leave a comment below, and I'll be very happy to come back to you. And if you fancy it, please do subscribe too. Next week we are going to be taking a look at turning a dip pen, which is a slightly different process to turning a normal pen, but the dip pens are really quite special. I enjoy turning them very much. So yes, thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you all again next week. Bye for now.